know, silent movies get a bum rap. They're thought of as inferior to talking pictures, and part of that reason is that for most of us, looking at silent movies in recent decades, the films themselves look pretty faded and beat up, like the prints have been dragged down a gravel road. But in the last couple of years, many of the very best silent films have been restored to clean, sharp, pristine quality and are now available on home video. And so the magic of silent film, which you can really see now at home, is the subject of this special show. And Roger begins by looking at the type of movie that most people associate first with the silent era, comedies.
Most of Charlie Chaplin's work and much of the work by Buster Keaton and other great silent comedians is available now on tapes and discs. And video stores say they're popular rental items. In fact, a lot of people probably think most silent movies were comedies. That's maybe because the great work of Chaplin, Keaton, Harold Lloyd, and the other silent clowns has aged better than some of the dramas. You could possibly make the argument that dramatic movies benefited from being able to talk. Most people today would probably agree. But silent movies were shot at 16 frames a second and talkies at 24 frames a second. And a lot of us grew up watching silent movies on sound projectors and somehow got the idea that everybody in a silent movie was racing through life. Now, timing is the essence of physical comedy.
Right.
And when you speed it up by a third, as they did in a lot of those movies we saw at summer camp, the jokes were lost. Now we can see the timing as these great comedians had it.
There's a great line being used to promote silent movies, and they say that you can listen to them with your eyes. And when they're shown, these comedies are shown in their proper speed, I think you're pulled into them in a way. I think it also applies to dramas as well. You're pulled into them in a way that sound pictures push you back. Of course, the artist most associated with silent comedy is Charles Chaplin. One Chaplin video worth watching is The Kid from 1921, with Chaplin as the tramp, the immigrant everyman who winds up taking care of an abandoned little boy. The film's greatest emotional moment is when the authorities try to take the kid, little Jackie Coogan, away from the tramp. Extraordinarily realistic emotion here. Also on the same video, Chaplin's little-known comedy, The Idle Class, also from 1921. Chaplin was 32 years old at the time and the king of movies. Here's some expert comic timing as he plays both the tramp and a rich drunk who has forgotten to put on his pants while getting dressed to go out. At the time he made these movies, Charles Chaplin was nothing less than the most famous person in the world. And American silent movies created stars of incredible power.
You know, Gene, you were talking about the way that silent films draw us in and sound films pushes away. I looked at a lot of these movies with a large group of people, family, friends, neighbors, and at one point I was looking at some of the little kids who were in the front row. And you know, kids today are showing movies like Batman and RoboCop, and when they watch them, they kind of squint up their faces, and there's a real high tension level. With these silent films, there was an openness, a peacefulness to their faces. They were looking up at the screen and having the kind of fantasy that sound films don't allow. Not only kids, I think, but sometimes the rest of us, too.
Coming up next, April marks the 100th anniversary of Charlie Chaplin's birth. Among a variety of tributes, one of the best is the reissue of fine prints of some of his classic short films. We'll show you what's available for home video use. When all sorts of celebrations are planned, as we in effect celebrate the birth of film comedy as well as the man who did so much to popularize film-going itself. In video stores, Chaplin's feature films will go on sale April 20th in the standard VHS format for the reduced price of $19.98. They're from Key Video. Here's a famous scene of Chaplin victimized by a feeding machine in Modern Times from 1935. On Laserdisc from Image Entertainment, many of the short films Chaplin made have been beautifully preserved by David Shepard of the University of Southern California's film department. For example, in 1916, one of Chaplin's choice physical comedies for Mutual Studios is Fireman, with Charlie playing a late-sleeping firefighter who always annoys his boss. A year later, and behind the screen, Chaplin plays a stagehand's assistant who is forever threatening to knock over the camera. As you watch this, think of the newly arrived immigrant masses 70 years ago watching Chaplin act out their frustrations in the workplace. In one of the film's best scenes, Chaplin enjoys a lunch break with split-second timing that is his trademark. Chaplin also shows his tender side in the same film, falling in love with another stagehand, a woman in disguise. Notice how Chaplin, who directed this film, uses a tighter shot for these more personal, emotional moments. That's Edna Purviance, his longtime co-star, and what you get from that sequence there is the depth of feeling of Charlie Chaplin. He obviously was more than just a slapstick comedian there. When he turns on the charm and has the kissing sequence there, you really feel it. The soundtrack is added, of course, to the silent films, and again, those films are from the Mutual era, and they're available only on Laserdisc, 4 to a disc, for $39.95.
Now, it's interesting here because we're talking about two different kinds. His feature films, like Modern Times and so forth, are out on tape for $19.95, and those were available in theaters a few years ago, having been restored. What's new, and only on Laserdisc, is the short subjects. And what amazed me in looking at the Laserdisc was the high quality of them, because in my life, I've never seen a Charlie Chaplin short that didn't look as if somebody hadn't dragged it behind a truck for about 5 miles. They're always scratched, and they're out of focus, and the light goes in and out, and there were dots all over the screen, and they look really crummy. On Laserdisc, these movies look brand new. They look as good as any black and white movie I've ever seen. They've been restored so carefully by this man from USC, and that's the discovery here, I think.
Well, also the timing. There's also been timing problems in terms of these films with them being printed with speeded up imagery and all that, so it just looks like he's running around like a little rat. Here the timing is down correctly, and the films look great.
It's like Chaplin has been given a whole new lease on life for a new generation.
For our Laserdisc pick of the month, I'm recommending that you prepare for the upcoming film biography of Charlie Chaplin by taking a look at the Laserdisc of Chaplin's brilliant Modern Times from 1936. It's included on a new Laserdisc called Chaplin, A Legacy of Laughter. Everyone remembers Modern Times for one scene, the extraordinary moment when the tramp, being overworked on the assembly line, literally becomes a mesh in the corporate machinery. But there's a lot more to Modern Times than just one scene. In an effort to speed up the workers' productivity, the tramp is also force-fed lunch by a machine. This restored version of Modern Times is available only on Laserdisc, and the print is superb. This is the best way to enjoy Charlie Chaplin's artistry. It's called Chaplin, A Legacy of Laughter, and Modern Times is our Laserdisc pick of the month.
I think I got another perfect one, my favorite romantic scene of all time. I first thought of Cary Grant kissing Ingrid Bergman in Notorious in what at the time was the longest movie kiss in history. But then I decided to go way back to 1931 to Charlie Chaplin's City Lights, with its heartbreaking, absolutely pure and perfect romance between Chaplin's little tramp and a blind girl played by Virginia Sherrill. Though he hasn't a penny, he gives her the richness of his love, and late in the picture, she recovers her sight and realizes that the kind man who helped her and played with her is not a man of wealth, but a poor little tramp. Get out your handkerchief. Love is blind? On the contrary. That great scene argues that love is being able to see beyond the physical world as one fragile spirit connects with another. I don't think any greater love has been shown in the history of the movies.
Well, that's a pretty big statement,
Yeah.
but just on the basis of City Lights, I'll agree with you. That's a terrific scene, and of course the payoff at the end of that movie is one of the great endings in movie history, so I'm glad that you reminded us of it. Coming up next, a biography of the comic actor and filmmaker upon whose small shoulders the American film industry was built.
Chaplin! Don't you want to know who I am?
I have no interest whatsoever in who you are. Mr. Chaplin.
That's Robert Downey Jr., quite effective at recreating the on- and off-stage personalities of Charles Spencer Chaplin, the Little Tramp. Richard Attenborough's biographical film moves and fits and starts. We don't need all of the titles that tell us exactly when and where the events are taking place, but I'm still recommending Chaplin because I think it's a good portrait of a political artist under fire late in his career. We first meet Charlie Chaplin in England as a variety show player. He travels to America and is brought to Hollywood by producer Max Sennett. Dan Aykroyd, who can't believe the young man standing before him is the same performer who played an old drunk in a music hall show he saw. One of Chaplin's off-screen weaknesses was young women. Here his friend, legendary screen star Douglas Fairbanks Sr., played by Kevin Kline in a terrific performance, warns him against his self-destructive behavior.
You are a truly strange fellow, Charles. A young man of what, 29? And who's this fellow escorting? Why, Mildred Harris, that intellectual giant of 16 who still sucks a thumb.
Another strong character is Chaplin's older brother, Sidney, played by Paul Reese. He becomes the manager of Chaplin's empire, and together they get their working-class mother released from a mental home in England and bring her to America.
I've dreamed of this moment for years.
Oh, this is America, Mum. This is where your dreams come true.
The film also goes on to cover Chaplin's political activism in the 30s, the best part of the movie, and how he offends J. Edgar Hoover, who will hound him after he becomes head of the FBI. These are some of my favorite scenes of the movie because we can study Chaplin's face as it literally loses its laugh lines. Maybe it should surprise no one that in a movie about an entertainment genius, the most fascinating characters, the ones that we can really get into, are the supporting players who we know the least. Faults and all, I still like Chaplin.
I can't recommend it. In fact, I thought it was a surprisingly bad movie, and I've been looking at a lot of original Chaplin films recently, and the guy was a genius. And Robert Downey is a genius in this movie at playing Chaplin.
That's one good thing.
Downey was ready to play Chaplin in any movie that anybody made, and Richard Attenborough has made a very bad film because this filmmaker has not focused on the fact that he's making a movie about a filmmaker. It's all of this stuff about social life and parties and all of the girls that he dated and all of the women that he married. It's like a National Enquirer story about Chaplin. There's not a single sequence in this film, like the ones that we saw, for example, in Guilty by Suspicion, that shows how directors and editors work on a moviola in order to make a piece of film work. And we know that Chaplin rehearsed and for hours, that he did the same take 20, 30, 50, 100 times, that he spent days and days in the editing room to make those films. And this movie kind of indicates that it was just all genius, and he just kind of was inspired.
No, I don't
that's
think,
why he was so great.
No, I don't think
so. And the
so,
political
Roger.
stuff is all
No,
murky
I
too,
don't- I don't
Gene.
think-
It
I don't-
doesn't really level with us.
I think it isn't murky at all. First, I'll take that part. The political stuff, I think, is very clear. The guy was suspected, he was basically suspected of being a communist, and offended Hoover, who used his sexual proclivities, Chaplin's, to try and get him out of the country. That's number one. I think it was very direct and clear on that. Second, in terms of the movie stuff, it would have been a better film if it had done some of the things you say. But there is a long sequence with Max Sennett where we see the effort that is required in getting the film right. There's a long scene there.
It wasn't.
Well, it was.
But you and I know enough about how movies are really made to know that even the scene that you're referring to was really faked for the mass audience and wasn't done in a way that it would have been done if a real movie were being made.
It shows improvisation on Chaplin's part, and Sennett having the smarts to let the guy go with his thing.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like Chaplin immediately comes up with something and Sennett says, boy, that's great. I mean, that's not how Chaplin achieved his effects. He did it through a lot of thought, a lot of work.
The film would have been better if it had done some of the things you said.